talked to you several years ago because actually I looked at the podcast episodes and I think you were one of my very early podcast episodes. I think you were like 20 something, 23
Oh,
or
wow.
something.
And how many have you done since?
Um, I just posted 183.
Wow.
So,
Oh,
and I've done like 30 for the I've done 30 for the at least 30 for the Illinois News Broadcasters Association.
cool. Well, I'm
But
honored to be back.
thanks. And then now for you, you are doing a media column. Like, is this like, are you the feeder replacement or something? Or
Well, I don't know. I mean, there's a hole there, and I know that I feel kind of lost without feeder there, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So that's kind of why I started doing it.
right.
And I know a lot about the media business. I've been writing for the Illinois Entertainer for the last 10 years as the media columnist there, and I've written a couple of books about the media, and I've worked in radio for 20 years, and I know virtually everybody in Chicago. So I felt that it was natural for me to try to do it. I don't have time. I own my own publishing company,
Right.
as you know, as one of
Yes.
my authors. Um, so I don't have time to do it, 5 days a week like Rob did it. But I'm going to try to do it once a week and just try to let people know what's happening in the media in Chicago.
But see, one thing he was good at is I don't know if people are going to tell you like the inside baseball kind of stuff. Like, hey, like give you the news before it's official. Are people doing that? Do they know that you're the reciprocatory for that? Recipient
I'm
for?
starting to get some of that already. So who knows? I'm not. I don't really consider myself an investigative journalist type. Like
Right.
Rob was more of that. I like doing feature stories and things like that. And I've interviewed like 300 plus members of the Chicago media over the last 30 years. So I have a big backlog of information that I can share, and I know these people personally, so a lot of times I get the scoops already anyway.
Yeah. So you said you've interviewed all these people. Well, what have you interviewed them for?
So I had a website called Chicago Radio Spotlight that I ran for about 10 years, and now I've been for the Illinois Entertainer for 10 years. And before that, I was writing for a magazine called Chicago Advertising and Media, which doesn't exist anymore, and Chicago Airwaves, which was another magazine. So I've been doing this for 30 years.
And then I noticed that you changed your tagline. You said something like creating content for 40 years or something.
Well, that's just, I also host three podcasts, and my co-publisher David Stern and I have been, writing together comedy and various different other things for 40 years. So that's where that tagline comes from.
Yeah, David Stern seems like a nice guy. I think I've seen him. See, I've seen him more often than I've seen you because
Yeah, no, I
we went
know.
to the Printers Row together. He came to my place to drop off some wine for being published and something
Right.
else. But yeah, he's really friendly.
Yeah, no, he's a great guy. He's my best friend and has been for 40 years.
And he's also very friendly and open, and he's not snotty or he's also,
No,
remained in the city. He's not suburban.
that's true. That's true. If he wasn't those things, that he wouldn't be my best friend. So
That's good. And how
that's the
did you
way I
guys
look at
meet?
it.
How did you guys meet?
We met in college. We worked at the radio station together at WPGU in Champaign, and he and I were paired together to write an ad for one of the clients of the radio station, and we were both advertising majors,
Mm,
and it went well, and we immediately hit it off, and we've been best friends ever since.
nice. And then also, okay, so I'm trying to break down what you're doing. So you wrote for Illinois Entertainer. Now, and also you do your own media blogs. I know that you've had that for a long time, Chicago
Right.
Spotlight. But do you only interview on air people?
Um, Mostly, yes. I have interviewed executives and producers and things like that too, but it's mostly on-air people.
Okay. And then do they ever not want to tell you information? Like, do they say a lot of things off the record?
Yes, they absolutely
Ooh,
do.
ooh,
They feel comfortable telling me stuff, but they always say right before they're going to tell me this is off the record. so
right.
so I respect that. I won't put it on there if it's something they don't want to, but they don't want publicized.
Okay, so basically, so you are teeing up for replacing feeder because they're telling you stuff that's private, which means they trust you, so they'll tell you other stuff.
Well, yes
Seems to
and
be a
no. I mean, they've been doing that for 30 years. So, you know, they're just my friends. Most of them are people that I know for a long time. So they feel comfortable telling me these things. They also know that I've been around the block a few times and I know they can't BS me.
right.
Right. I know how things really work in the business. And so they don't even bother trying to do that. Cuts through
Yeah.
the red tape of an interview.
And so then so the media thing that you're doing, which is a weekly roundup of media information, is that your what website is that at?
That's on my blog. I'm on my daily blog called Rick Kaempfer, .blogspot.com.
Okay,
That's where every Friday I post it around 10 o'clock in the morning if people are interested.
nice. And then how do you keep everything so organized? Because you sound like you're like a micro media, because you got the publishing, you got the writing, you got the consulting, and you've got the media information, and you got the podcasting. So
Right.
what don't you do? Do you cook?
I do. I cook every night.
Wow.
Uh,
Okay.
I was raised by Germans, so that's my explanation for how I'm organized. And I'm really only organized creatively. Like if you ask my wife, "Am I organized?" She'll say, "No, not at all."
Yeah.
So, but
Oh yes.
I've been curating ideas. Like when I was a radio producer for John Landecker and for Stephen Geary, my job was to come up with ideas every day. And so I've been organized in doing that because I was forced to do it every single day for the last, 35 years. So it comes naturally now.
Yeah, and also I read your okay, I read two of your books. One was the Radio Producer's Handbook, which I still have on my shelf behind me, which
Oh,
I should have
good.
taken out. Yeah, I should take it out to show everybody. I read that. It's extremely helpful. It's not just for good for producing radio, but just producing content. Like you can get some good tips in that.
Thank you.
And then also the other one was the novel. My gosh, I forgot now because I asked you about it in my for my blog.
It was called Severance.
Okay, then I read two of your novels. Severance was great about the radio business.
Thank you.
It's just very well written. And then the other one was my gosh, the one that you wrote with that guy Brandon.
Oh, The Living Wills.
Living Wills, right.
Yes.
Yes, I read all three of those
Oh,
and
wow. Well, I've got a new one that is coming out around Christmas time. My third novel, my eighth book. So look for
what's it
that.
about? What's it about?
It is a coming of age story that takes place in the Cold War. It's kind of about my very weird childhood growing up in Germany uh, while the Cold War was raging, while my father worked for the Department of Defense. So I'm kind of an army brat, but my parents are German immigrants. So it was a very unusual upbringing. And I wanted to highlight that and show what the Cold War was really like because I really experienced it.
Ooh, okay. So, well, first of all, were you born in Germany?
I was born in Chicago. I moved to Germany when I was around 10, and I lived there until I came home for my senior year of high school here.
Did you go to American schools or German schools?
I went to an American school,
Okay. So
and
did you go? Yeah.
we lived on army bases, but every weekend we were, seeing German relatives. So it was really the full experience.
Wow. So what was the Cold War like from the German point of view?
Well, it was still East Germany and West Germany at that time, and my father worked for the Department of Defense, and I didn't realize how high up he was. I mean, we would have like Alexander Haig came to dinner at our house once,
Wow.
and he was the supreme Allied commander of NATO at that time, and I had no idea what kind of security clearance my father must have had in order for something like that to take place.
Mhm.
And then I started thinking about it as an adult. My father's been gone now for 30 years. And I thought about how we often traveled to the Iron Curtain countries. We went to East Germany several times. We went to Hungary and Romania and Yugoslavia while it was still communist. So I really saw firsthand what it was like on the other side of the Iron Curtain, and it was grim.
Yeah. So what was it like? Because I know people who went there. Well, no, of course I know people who came from there, but
Right.
what was it like when you say grim?
Well, we went to Romania. My father was born in Romania uh, in the 30s when it was still part of, you know, they would just left the Austrian-Hungarian Empire after World War One, and they were a German. It was a German town in Romania. We came and visited them in 1976, and they still didn't have running water in their town.
Hmm.
It was it was very backwards. When you go to and East Germany was really an eye opener because West Germany was such a vibrant country, and it was like going from full color to black and white. It was gray. Everything was gray and boxy. There were still bombed out areas that they hadn't repaired after World War II. It was a very depressing place. Russian soldiers all over the place. The every As Americans, we were followed around by the Stasi the entire time we were there, and it was scary, palpably scary. I was 13 years old at the time.
Yeah, my mom actually came from Jewish, but she came from Leipzig, which is it became East Germany.
Yeah,
And then we
I've
went
been to
back there
Leipzig.
after, yeah. And then we went back there after, many years after it reunited. And we went to a photo exhibit in Leipzig about how Leipzig used to be. And in the
Yeah,
70s, there were pictures of piles of rubble that they
yeah.
didn't remove from the bombing.
It was depressing.
And also, of course, the Stasi, it came out later that everybody was telling on everybody else,
Well,
snitching.
yeah. One of the things I investigated was, after the war ended, they opened up the Stasi files, and if anybody had a Stasi file, you were allowed to look at it. And there were 5.6 million files of people that they were tracking, just to
Yeah.
give you an idea. And it was a pretty small country. East Germany, was not half of Germany. It was maybe a quarter of Germany. Um, and they had 5.6 million files.
Gosh. And then what was because I heard that Hungary was a little different during communism, during when the Russians were running the Eastern Bloc.
Yeah, Hungary wasn't as bad as Romania. Yugoslavia was pretty bad too. Um, Tito was in power at that time. And there's a scene in the book that I don't want to give away, but there's a chapter that takes place in Yugoslavia that's pretty memorable, which is an absolute true story that happened to me.
Well, what was because I went to Yugoslavia in '95, so that was only not many years after it fell.
Right.
What was that like?
So, we drove through the country. We were just driving through it to get to Romania, and you just have to stop every few miles because there were animal crossing the highway. There were very few cars. We went to a bar to watch a soccer game, and people were like throwing glasses against the wall, and it was
Wow.
just like, whoa! It was not like anything I had ever witnessed before in my life. We
So
went to
was
the
it?
zoo in Belgrade, and they didn't have cages for some of the animals. Like hippos were just wandering around.
Hmm. So it was. So it felt like chaos over there.
It was chaos. Yes.
And I also went to Romania in '95, and I'll just say it seemed very dusty. It just seemed like there was a lot of, I think the Saxons, a lot of the German kind of people, they left to go to Germany, and it wasn't exactly the most positive place I've ever been, but
No, it's not on my list of places to go. I don't need to go back.
yeah. I mean, I didn't go during it, but yeah, what was it like during the communist time?
Well, we had to, as Americans traveling through Eastern Europe, we had to stop at um, check in at the police station, and then they would come and check on us. They had a policeman sitting outside whatever home we visited throughout the entire time we were there. In the town we were in, there was one car and one paved road. And as I mentioned, no indoor plumbing. Everyone had outhouses, they had wells, they didn't have running water. It was like going back in time.
And then when you were behind the Iron Curtain, what were the people like?
Um,
Like, what was the mood?
Well, they were friendly to us. The people themselves were very nice. I don't really have any negative things to say about the people, but they were in a constant sense of fear. That was obvious, and they were uncomfortable that we were there, because it was drawing attention to them in ways that they did not want attention drawn to them.
Wow.
But my dad grew up in that town, and so they were happy to see him. And my grandparents came along too, and that was this town I had heard about my whole life. This was where they grew up. This was their whole life, and I saw it. I was like, whoa.
Was it a small town?
Yeah, I think the population was 100, something like that.
Well, how did he get out of that town?
So this is part of the story, and one of the things that he told me about was, so all the men were off at war. The Romanians were fighting on the German side, and my grandfather was, sent to the Eastern Front,
And this is World War II or
World War II,
Yeah.
and my dad was like 10 years old, and he and the other young boys led a wagon train of women out of Romania into Austria, and there were, several families. They're still, in touch with all of those families. I met most of them in the years since, but it was the women that did it, and the little boys.
Wow. And so they went to Austria, and then what happened? Did they seek asylum or?
Well, they were considered refugees.
Okay.
So they lived. My mother was born in a refugee camp
Hmm.
in Austria, and so she was, they were ethnic Germans. They weren't Germans of Germany, and in those days, the Germans did not consider anybody that was not from Germany as a full-fledged German. You know what I
Whoa.
mean? They were
Even though they were ethnically German.
right.
Wow.
Yeah, it was not a good time. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, because I did meet somebody many years ago. I met somebody at Pete's at Pete's Coffee Cafe, and her mom was German, ethnic German, but she wasn't living in Germany, and she was treated extremely horribly. I forgot what country she was living in, but she went through a horrible experience. So it wasn't like she was given immunity because she was,
No,
German.
they it was like a slave labor camp that my mother was born in. The children were taken away and put into like nurseries, and they forced the women to work. The men were sent to war. My grandfather was sent to the western one was sent to the Western Front with no guns or ammunition. He was captured his first day on the battlefield. Um, and they didn't really identify with the German cause. Let's put it
Right.
that way.
Wait, so what, I know your dad was born in what's now Romania. So where was your mom born?
He was born in Austria. Um,
I mean, where
but
was your mom? Sorry, where was your mom's family from? Like
they were
before.
also from Romania, but a different part of
Okay.
Romania.
Okay. Wow.
They were also ethnic Germans.
Okay. And then now when you were growing up, did they talk about these things or?
Yes, they did, but it didn't become real to me until I witnessed it myself.
I
And
see.
that's what this book is about. That's my experiencing all these stories, because everyone hears stories. Oh, I walked to school both ways. It was
Right.
8 miles through the snow and whatever. My dad told me about some of these stories about protecting his mother and sister when the Russians came in and
Right.
raped women,
Yeah.
and it didn't feel real. And then we went and saw these places, and it was like, holy mackerel,
Oh my
scary.
gosh. Yeah, because sometimes I meet Eastern Europeans, people, who grew up behind the Iron Curtain and now they're here, and they tell me these incredibly horrible stories, either about their parents or what they went through. Because you assume that there was a clear delineation. But if you were a certain ethnicity in a certain country, you were a target. And
Right,
there was a lot of suffering during that time.
right.
So
Like as they were fleeing Romania, the Tito's partisans were running Yugoslavia, and they were killing every German they saw.
wow.
Didn't matter if they were ethnic Germans or whatever. I mean, it was just a bad time everywhere.
Gosh, it's horrible. So then you eventually moved here.
Yeah.
Oh, you were born here, then you moved there, and then you moved back. So when you moved back, how did you feel? Like, did you feel American? Did you feel international? Did you feel German?
So when I was growing up in Chicago, I felt like a German boy because we spoke German in the house. I learned English in kindergarten. They sent me to school, and that's where I learned English. And then we moved to Germany, I felt like an American
Okay.
because the Germans didn't really recognize me as a German. And then I came back to America, and I felt like a German again. They called me Rick the German Boy when I was working with Stephen Gary as a bit.
Okay.
Um, but it wasn't really a bit because I had just been in the country a few years. So
And did you have an accent at first when you were first learning? Because you don't have an accent.
uh, they tell me when I first came back that I did have a slight accent, but I don't know if that's true or not. I never thought I had one.
Okay. And then when you go to Germany now, because okay, the thing is that I'm half German, but of course I didn't grow up there. But the thing is, there's certain things about German culture that you get a feeling for. And then when I went to Germany, I felt like, okay, this makes sense to me because it was almost like my grandparents times like 50 million. But
Right.
the thing is, but I'm surprised that when you go there, you still feel very American. You don't
Well,
feel
I don't feel German here anymore.
right.
And both, so when I go back, it's been years. When I've gone back probably 5 or 6 times.
Okay.
And at first, my German is rusty because my mom doesn't really speak German with me anymore. My dad was the one, and he passed away 30 years ago. And but after about 3 days, I'm right back in the groove.
Nice. So how the heck I studied German and it's extremely difficult. Like do you have any advice for for learning it? It's just the grammar so extremely hard.
The grammar is the reason I didn't go to the German school
Okay.
because I was 10 or 11 years old, but and I spoke fluent German, but I didn't know the rules, the grammar rules. I had like a first grade reading level in German. And so starting in a German school would have been a terrible idea.
Yeah.
And I still have troubles with their D's and Dus's and
Right.
things like that. But I speak a slang dialect in German, and you can slur the words if you don't know, which
Okay.
is what I do.
And what's the dialect? I mean, where's it from? Is it from that Romanian area?
It's Swabian. It's called Donauschwaben, um, which people from the along the Donau River or the Danube River um, speak this kind of German.
Hmm. And then when you speak German, do you have an accent? When you speak standard German, do you have an accent that people say, wait, what's going on here?
Yeah, I do. I sound more like an American now, unfortunately.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And so about fiction, because one thing that's very frustrating about fiction is I think nowadays it's very hard to sell fiction.
Yeah,
Do you agree
it
with
is.
that?
Totally.
So what's happened? Because I know that with your previous fiction books you did pretty well. So, but what happened to the fiction situation?
Well, I think it's just a glut in the marketplace. There's so many there's so many books, and in order to get publicity, and you know this,
Yeah.
you have to when you're selling fiction, you kind of have to sell it by the topic as opposed to the story, because they're not going to bring you onto a TV or a radio show or even do an interview with you
Right.
for a newspaper or whatever, just based on the story.
Unless
So
you're
you have
Stephen
to
King. Unless you're Stephen King.
right, right. So you have to have an angle. Um, and yeah, the other problem is fiction writers are often introverts
I'm
and
not,
don't.
but okay.
No, I know, and I'm not either. But just to get
Okay.
the word out there,
Yeah.
um, it takes dedication, and it takes being able to go out there and push up and talk about yourself. People
Right.
don't like to do that. Um, I think that's one of the reasons why.
But I think that even not being because I'm not an introvert either, but I think with the COVID it messed me up. But I think that it's just very hard to promote because I think now they want certain kinds of stories out there and there aren't as many outlets.
Well, there's no such thing really as bookstores anymore. That's one thing, where it used to be, there used to be all kinds of bookstores everywhere. The main chains are pretty inhospitable to smaller publishers. Um, and the main publishers, there's four of them basically.
Right.
They take no chances at all anymore. So
Mhm.
you really have, in order to get a published novel with one of the four main publishers, it's a miracle if it happens these days.
Well, do you think that because I noticed that when people are published by a major publisher, sometimes they get really good publicity, but then people tell me, well, that's not necessarily true because they're only supporting certain people.
Yeah, it's not
So
necessarily true. I mean, my first two books were with New York publishers, and I had to do all of it myself,
you did.
all publicity. But I knew how to do it because
Mhm.
I had been in the media, so it was not that hard for me. And they didn't know me, or they didn't know Chicago. They're New York publishers, so they were not helpful at all in promoting it. Now, as distribution is a different story. You're going to get nationwide distribution. And
Mhm.
my book, The Radio Producer's Handbook, was in 65 universities. And
Wow.
I don't know that I would have been able to do that by myself.
Right. Well, and
So
also
they
a good thing
were,
about a good thing about a regular publisher, if you have an agent, is you get an advance.
yes, but they're not doing many advances anymore either.
They're not.
No.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Because even
I-
$1,000 advance, like that's better than nothing. So
But well, yeah, that's true. But you don't get, so the first $1,000 you make when you sell the book just counts against the advance.
right.
So it's really just an advance of what you're going to make anyway.
Yeah. So now another thing, so let's just break this down. So about the writing, you're a really good writer, nonfiction and fiction. So how did you learn how to write so well?
I I don't know. I have an ear for the language, I think. Um, just because of having spoken two languages and having to learn it, and being a fish out of water in both countries forces you to really concentrate on what people are saying, hear the words that they're saying, figure out the dialect, figure out slang, that sort of thing. And the character in my new novel fashions himself an anthropologist, a studier of cultures as a
Okay.
little kid, which is kind of what I was.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that, about being bicultural. Because
Mhm.
I interviewed an actor and he was he's bilingual, he lived abroad and he's sort of like in a different level, like he's in society, but he's not totally of it. But what's it like to be bicultural?
I used when I was a kid, I hated it. I really was really I just wanted to be normal. I just wanted to be like every other kid, and I always felt like a weirdo.
Okay, well, first of
Um,
all, what do you mean by normal? Like how did you define normal back then?
well, just I just wanted to be like a typical American kid, who wasn't wearing lederhosen. You know, stuff.
Were you wearing that?
Yes,
Wow.
yes.
Okay.
I mean, I had no idea. I was, culturally inept. I grew up in Chicago in the Lincoln Square area there,
Oh, that's
which
German.
at the time was 100% German. You could go
Wow.
to any store and you didn't need to speak English. The grocer was German. You get your haircut at a barber that was German. Everything you did was German. My parents hung out only with German people, and so when I went to an American school, um, I really felt like a freak.
Wow.
Um, because I didn't know anything. I just had to figure it out. I didn't know what baseball was. I grew up playing soccer in America in the 70s, in the
Right.
60s. Pretty unusual.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to be like a normal kid who could, blend in, and I couldn't.
And then when did you get over that? This is very psychological, but I'm very interested in this because I lived abroad and my mom was an immigrant. So I
Okay, I got over it when I realized that there was value in it. When I realized that my life experiences taught me things that they didn't teach other people.
yeah.
And as I get older, I value it more and more.
And then have you found other people who are like that, like who are cosmopolitan, who get it? Or because I find that it's, especially in Chicago, it's not exactly the most
Yeah.
cosmopolitan place I've ever been, but
Yeah, not really. I don't run into it a lot. I have other friends that were, brought up in the same way in Chicago. And they go one of two directions. One is they go all German or they go all American. They totally reject their German heritage, or they become their parents. And I kind
oh,
of picked a middle path.
okay. So where are the Germans now? Because obviously Lincoln Square is not German anymore.
Well, they've assimilated into society better than most other nationalities in America. The German community is dying. There are, when I was a kid, there were probably 30 German restaurants in Chicago. I think there's maybe 5 or 6 now.
Yeah.
Um, and I played soccer. There were 7 German soccer clubs. We had our own league of German soccer clubs. I think there's one left, and I'm on the board of directors for that.
Nice.
My son played for it. My dad was one of the founders of it. Um, and so, they're all over the place. There's no German neighborhood in Chicago anymore.
No. And then also you're in the suburbs. Is it Coons still out there?
No, it's gone.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I live in Mount Prospect, and that was in Mount Prospect. So I'd go
Mhm.
over there and listen to the old German ladies saying mean things to the people that didn't understand German.
Yeah.
That's that was the best part of being bicultural. When I lived in Germany, people thought that I didn't speak German, so they would say things in front of me that they shouldn't have said in front of me. And
Mhm.
then the same thing here, when I looked very German and I could understand English, same thing. It was like a superpower.
Yeah. Well, I'm sort of like sometimes with Japanese. I mean, not that I'm like my Japanese is not like your German, but I'll be around some Japanese people and I'll just eavesdrop to make sure they're not talking about me or something.
Hmm.
So that which is also in the area you live in. So back to the radio thing. I know I interviewed many years ago about the radio experience, but you were in radio for many years, and
Yeah.
why did you love it so much?
I love the creativity of it. Like you mentioned, I'm a writer. I always considered myself a writer, even when I was in radio. Um, and that was just so much fun. And I'm an average air talent, but I was writing for guys that are tremendous,
Yeah.
that are top of all Hall of Famers,
Yeah.
radio Hall of Famers, and they would take a good idea and make it unbelievably great,
Yeah.
and that was just a thrill to watch.
And then, I know Severance is incredible. Everybody should read the book Severance. It is so excellent because it really captures what happened to radio. But how do you feel about what the direction that radio took? Like you're probably talking about the late 90s, right?
Well, yeah, I feel like I was in the heyday of radio in Chicago. When I was at the Loop, the station was just gigantic. It's hard to describe to people today how big that radio station was. I still run into people who recognize my name
Mm.
from that radio station 30 years ago, and I was a bit player. I wasn't really an on-air guy. I mean, I had a couple of shifts, but they knew me because people talked about me on the radio, and that was 30 years ago. But each day there we had 500,000 people listening or something like that. It was just an
Mhm.
insane number of listeners. And then I was also in radio when it all started consolidating, and all 3 or 4 companies bought everything, which is what we were just talking about with the publishing business. Same thing happened to radio,
Mhm.
and I watched it decline before my eyes.
Well, so
And
well, because I listened to the radio during the heyday. Also, I was into old time radio, but I listened to the Loop during that heyday period, Disco
yeah,
Demolition and stuff. I was too young to actually go anywhere, but
right.
and I do remember the excitement about radio. I can't imagine working in it, but what happened? What was it like to work in radio when it was really incredible? And then the changes that took place. What were the changes? Not just the ownership, but the culture of it.
Well, it felt like show business, which it doesn't feel like at all anymore. Now it
Mm,
feels like working in an office.
mm.
But in the heyday, it was every day was exciting. I just interviewed Bob Stroud, who was on the Drive for many years, and he worked with me at the Loop. And we talked about what it was like just showing up for work every day. You'd run into, every major star in the world came through that radio station,
Yeah.
and it was just commonplace every day to see a huge superstar walking around. And for a young kid in his 20s, which is what I was, it was just beyond exciting.
Hmm.
Now the pay was not good.
It wasn't good because I always assumed that the pay was better during the heyday.
Well, it was for the stars,
But
like
behind the
Steve.
scenes, it wasn't because now it's not good. I mean, so even behind the scenes, it wasn't better back then.
It was better. So when the stars got big enough that they could impose their will on management and get, good producers, there was a stretch there for about 10, 15 years where producers were making good money. And I
Okay.
was lucky to be part of that. Um, and then consolidation happens, they got a cut, and you're looking at, you know, X number of dollars here they can cut, and you hire someone for half as much, and the quality didn't matter anymore. They
Yeah.
started bringing in syndicated shows,
Mhm.
and before you knew it, it was a hollow shell of what it once was.
So it's because it wasn't exciting and local and people coming in. It was more just like processing
It was very
audio.
corporate.
Yeah.
You'd have if the stock price went down, people got fired.
Right.
And it had been a self-sustaining thing before that. If you were making money, um, that was all that mattered. If
Mhm.
the company could make money, then you could do what you wanted to do.
Mhm.
And it was free. The freedom at the Loop was unbridled. You could do whatever you wanted to do on the radio. There were no rules,
Hmm.
and that was really exciting.
Wow. But there's also another side of radio, of old school radio, where the guys got away with a lot. Okay, because now it would not fly, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, you're talking about Me Too kind of stuff, or
Yeah, and I'm not talking. It's not even like an intellectual kind of thing. It's not even a conceptual thing. It's like stuff that actually happened. Because I've heard about certain people who'd say, "Oh my gosh, if Me Too were around, I'd be in major trouble."
yeah, I witnessed some bad things.
Right. So what do you think about that and the change? Because now, like I see people being let go for it. Just the same things don't fly anymore, basically.
No, and they probably should have never been allowed to fly in the day either. Um, yeah, that I I could tell stories. I'm waiting for people to die.
Right.
Then I'll tell some stories on that in that regard.
Right. Yeah, I heard some. Yeah, I mean, people told me stuff, and I've heard some stuff, but we can't talk
Yeah,
about it. But the
right.
thing is, I guess like see when they say that radio used to be so great and so free. At the same time, there's also a liberty to behave a certain way, and it seems like there weren't repercussions. Or am I wrong? I don't know.
No, you're not wrong. That was the downside of it, without question.
Mhm. And also, I know that in Hollywood too, like people, things
It was
start.
just like Hollywood. We were mini Hollywood. I always the reason why radio was so huge in Chicago was L.A. has Hollywood, New York has Broadway, Chicago we had our local TV and local radio, but we were still this giant market, and we had the best talent. And so those people, the Chicago celebrities, they were as big in Chicago as some of the Hollywood stars were. And so they did get away with a lot.
And then, well, so in terms of the Hollywood aspect, the feeling of it, what was it like to work in that, and then see the changes? And did you notice an attitude in the on-air people when things were changing, where they were becoming more corporate?
Yeah, well,
And
the attitude,
not the Me Too stuff. I'm just saying the general work.
it was forced onto them. The attitude change was forced on it. That's what Severance is about.
Yeah.
Severance is about when that new attitude. I mean, I remember sitting in a meeting once, a promotion meeting, and they had sold us. We're doing a morning show from a Jiffy Lube at like 5:30. This is with a Landecker show at 5:30 in the morning, and they weren't even open. The Jiffy Lube wasn't even open, and I said, "Well, what? Why would we do that?" Well, they're paying us money. Yeah, but we have to do a show from there. Why would people listen to that?
Mhm.
And they're like, well, who cares? They're paying us money.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. But see, I
It,
do work. I never worked in radio when it was fun, like what you're talking about and creative, but I still love working in radio and I love radio. So I think it's because there are really great things about it. I love working in the media basically because you still meet incredible people who are able to meet deadlines, who are able to think on the fly, the edge, the danger. So I think it's still really fun, but I don't know about that other kind of fun that people talk about because a lot of people say it was way better before. But I don't want some lecherous guy feeling me up or something. I'd probably punch him. So
right. I wouldn't want
you know
that
what I
either.
mean?
Yeah. No, I,
If they even
I,
did
I
that.
get what you're saying. It wasn't quite that bad, but there were definitely moments that were bad. I still like it. I still like it too. I host 3 podcasts. To me, that's like doing radio. I feel like I'm doing radio when I host a podcast. I love doing it. It's it's still a creative outlet for me.
Okay, so the 3 podcasts, can you just name what the 3 podcasts are? Because I can't keep track of all your pursuits.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. Yes, I have a show called Minutia Men that I host with Dave Stern, my co-publisher, and that's kind of just like a comedy show. We're ranked in the top 1% in the world somehow,
Wow. Wow.
and we
How
and
did
we
how
do
did you
an.
get okay, how did you make it so successful?
I wish I knew the answer to that. I really don't know. I think we just have fun. We
Okay.
just we're just ourselves.
But
It's very
you didn't promote it hard or anything or
no. No. And we're not with a big network or anything with Radio Misfits Podcast Network locally here in Chicago. And I don't know how it got so big, but we're happy it is.
nice.
And we do an interview show called Minutia Men Celebrity Interview, and that's every other week. And then I host a soccer podcast. I'm still interested in soccer, and it's called Free Kicks with Adam and Rick. I host that with the head of the Illinois Youth Soccer Association, and we talk about the Premier League and
Nice.
things going on internationally.
Well, with the celebrity one, who do you interview for celebrities?
Well, we've had Mark Cuban on. We try not to be political.
Right.
I don't want to hear that stuff. So, but we
Right.
did have Anthony Scaramucci on once. He was funny. It was
Yeah.
we have people that are either big stars that we ask minutia about, or people themselves that are minutia in terms of why they're celebrities, and we get into that. That's kind of our pitch on that. It's a little
Oh,
different than a usual interview show.
wait, so you asked them, you mean the minutia of being a celebrity or
Well, like people that are not considered, A-list celebrities. Let's say they're C-list or D-list celebrities, but have interesting stories and aren't interviewed as often, and people that we admire for whatever reason that we just like talking to. Um, and I think that's part of the reason why that's become popular. It's different than the other shows out there.
gosh, it's incredible that you're able to cut through because there are millions of podcasts and you're able to cut through that, cut through the competition.
Yeah,
How the heck did you get Mark Cuban? He's big
just
time.
just emailed him. And the other thing is, I was a producer for 20 years, and so I know how to book guests. It's something
Yeah.
that I had to do professionally for many years. I still have all the contacts with people.
So what's your advice for getting guests? Even though people can read your excellent book, The Radio Producer's Handbook, which is incredible.
Well, you know what is available now that wasn't when that book came out is social media. And a
Right.
lot of these stars are on social media and handle it themselves. They have their own accounts. And if
Mhm.
you can get directly to a star, you've got a much better chance than going through the millions of channels of managers and PR people. And if you get a person directly, and those are the ones that we have the most fun with.
Nice. And then what's your advice for creating good content that people will listen to or watch since you were able to cut through the competition?
I think if it amuses you or if it interests you, it's going to interest somebody else. And I don't think through any more than that. I'm not thinking about a target audience. I'm not thinking about why people are tuning in. I'm just trying to make something that I think will be entertaining, and that's it.
Okay. And then also about, just marketing in general. I mean, this is a weird question, but are you like driven, like money driven, or are you content driven? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm definitely not money driven.
You're not.
Um,
So
no,
you're an artist type.
I am. But my partner, my co-publisher Dave, he's more of the money guy. He handles the financial end of
Yeah.
things, and I need somebody like that. I need my wife for that too in my real life.
Okay.
She handles all of that stuff.
So you're basically a very creative person and you care about putting out good content, but then you leave the financial stuff and the marketing stuff to somebody else if you possibly can.
Yeah, I can handle the promotion and marketing, I guess, somewhat, but the the financial nitty gritty, like I couldn't tell you how we fill out 1099s or any of that stuff. I don't know any of that.
Okay. And what kind of promotional advice do you have for people since you were in the business for so long?
Personal relationships. Get to know the people that are booking the guests. That's the best way to do it. You get to know them. In my position now as the publisher, and we've published now 80 some books. I won't pitch a guest if I don't think it's right for a show. And so
Right.
people have learned to trust me. And when I do pitch a guest for a show, I present the entire segment to them. Like
Right.
this is, you can ask A, B, C, D, and E, and you're going to fill 8 minutes of time or whatever.
Mhm.
And they really appreciate that.
Okay. So hook me up with a Block Club Chicago because I have no in there. I can't
Oh yeah, I know the editor there.
yeah, so I mean, yeah, I know somebody who knows them and I can't believe me, I've tried different ways and no dice. So I don't know. I'm just
We'll
putting you on
talk.
the spot. I'm putting you on the spot.
We'll talk. I can help you with that.
Okay, so anything else you want to say because this is very interesting. And this is the first time I do have a language blog. It's called Metrolingua, and the German part is extremely in my wheelhouse. I love language.
Yes, I know. I've been following you for years. Yeah,
Right.
I think you do a great job with your podcast and your column. And I'm a big fan of your book. I
Thank you.
Your novel is
Yeah,
excellent.
guys
People,
like it. It's very weird because I've had like consistently except for one guy, he wasn't as into the genre, but I'm surprised at the amount of guys who did like it. And it's like bro types and like this one dude who's like a jock, like not really a deep thinker. He loved my book. It's very interesting. I think it's because it's not like a girly feeling book or something. I don't know.
what I like about it is it's a slice in time. It
Yeah.
takes place in the 90s. It's just it's comforting to go back in that time. You know, I went through a lot of what you went through in that book, and I just found it relatable.
Yeah, thank you. And this is not, I didn't ask you this question just so you give me promotion, but I did write the first draft of a pilot. So hopefully somebody out there in Hollywood, I'm in the WGA, everybody. So hopefully
Oh, great.
somebody will see yeah, I've been practicing pitches. I've been talking to people in the business, like help me trying to get help practicing pitches, but I hope to see it on the screen sometime, everybody. So if anybody out there has any
Great.
connections, I've got a good idea, very good idea that takes place in Chicago, potential audience, so.
There you go. 8
But
million people here.
that's true. All right. So anything else about any other thing you want to? So sorry, when does your novel comes out at Christmas time?
Yeah.
And are you gonna sell it at the Chris Kindle Markt? Do you ever go there?
Oh, that's a great idea. I hadn't even thought of that. I was thinking, so I'm going to be selling it to some of the Army brat world who will really, I think, appreciate it. And I'm still tied into that world and the German community here in Chicago. I told you I was on the board of the soccer club, so
Yeah.
I'm going to pitch it through that. But I hadn't thought about going to the Chris Kindle
Chris
Mark.
Kindle Markt. Well, do you ever go down there?
I
I
go
love.
every year.
Yeah, I love it. Everybody,
Yeah.
everybody should go there in the winter. It's wonderful, and they have authentic German potato salad that I grew up with.
Oh, me too. I love the potato, and they've got the Kilometerwurst, which is the really long the long sausages. I love those. Those are fantastic.
And then I don't know if you call potato pancakes. Do you call them latkes? I did. Or is that a Jewish thing?
I think that's a Jewish thing, but it's
Same
delicious.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
potato pancakes. And
Yep.
then, yeah. So, okay. Well, All right, thanks. And then I'm gonna stop recording
Okay.
here, just a second. And, okay, and then I'm gonna stop. And I'm gonna stop this right here. Okay.